How many times have you been out there, staring at a blank fish finder, sitting on a spot that you know that you feel in your gut should be loaded with fish, but it's not? Today we're talking about the single biggest mistake in winter bream fishing. It's the mistake of confusing a random deep hole with a real winter staging area. And trust me, they are not the same thing. In this video, I'm going to show you the subtle signs you've been ignoring. These are the signs that separate the guys who fill a bucket from the guys who go home with just a cold. The reason you're not catching anything has less to do with your bait or your lure, and everything to do with a simple, brutal misunderstanding of what a bream needs to survive the winter. So let me ask you this right now, and be honest. Do you believe that the deepest hole is always the best spot? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments before we even get started. Every single winter, the exact same story plays out on lakes and reservoirs all over the country. Anglers, good anglers, pull out their hydrographic maps. They scan for the darkest blue spot, the deepest contour line, and they think they've hit the jackpot. They assume that's where the mother lode is. It's what we've all been taught for generations, right? Go deep in the winter, the old-timers say. And for years, we've listened. We drill hole after hole in the middle of that basin, convinced the fish have to be down there. It's an easy rule to follow. It feels perfectly logical. Cold on top means go to the bottom where it's warmer. But what if that entire premise is flawed? What if that piece of common knowledge, that deeper is better rule, is the very thing keeping you from catching fish? It's time to challenge that idea. First, let's just blow up the main myth. The deepest hole is not automatically the best spot. In fact, many times, it's the absolute worst place to be. Think of it like a basement in a house. It's deep, sure, but if it's flooded, moldy, and has no air, nobody is going to live there. The same exact principle applies underwater. Fish are living creatures. They need more than just depth to survive, especially in the harsh winter environment. They are seeking comfort and safety. They need specific conditions to thrive. Just drilling a hole in the middle of a 50-foot basin because the map says it's deep is pure guesswork. It's lottery ticket fishing. You might get lucky once in a while, but it's not a reliable strategy for consistently finding fish. We have to start thinking beyond that one single dimension of depth. So if not depth, then what? Let's talk about the most critical element, oxygen. You can't see it, you can't feel it, but it determines where every single fish will be. During the winter, especially under thick ice and snow cover, photosynthesis stops. Weeds die off and begin to decay. This process of decomposition consumes enormous amounts of dissolved oxygen. And where does this decaying matter settle? You guessed it. It settles in the deepest, most stagnant parts of the lake. That big, deep hole you found on the map can very easily become an anoxic zone, a dead zone. There is simply not enough oxygen there to support life. A bream that settles in a spot like that is signing its own death warrant. They instinctively know this, so they will avoid these areas, even if the water temperature is technically stable. Let's dig deeper into that idea of decomposing matter. Picture the bottom of that deep hole. Over the summer and fall, all the dead algae, leaves, and weeds have slowly drifted down and settled there. It creates a thick layer of black, smelly muck. You know the stuff. The kind that comes up on your anchor and stinks up the whole boat. This muck is the engine of oxygen depletion. As bacteria break it down, they use up all the available oxygen in the immediate area. So while your fish finder might read 35 feet, the bottom 5 feet of that water column could be completely uninhabitable for fish. They might suspend high above it, but they certainly won't be feeding or resting on the bottom where you're dropping your jig. This is a trap that catches thousands of anglers every winter. They fish the bottom of a dead zone. So, what separates a dead hole from a live one? It comes down to a few key ingredients. A good wintering hole isn't just a simple bowl. It's a complex piece of underwater real estate. It needs to have features. It needs to have life-sustaining properties. Instead of looking for the single deepest point, you need to start looking for spots with a combination of depth, structure, and a clean bottom. This is where the real art of winter fishing begins. You need to become an underwater detective. You're not just looking for a spot on a map. You're looking for a complete habitat, a place where a school of bream can safely and comfortably spend several months of the year. It's a subtle shift in thinking, but it makes all the difference in the world. It changes the way you look at a frozen lake entirely. One of the biggest telltale signs of a good spot is the bottom composition. Bream and the small invertebrates they feed on much prefer a hard bottom. We're talking about sand, gravel, rock, or even hard-packed clay. These areas don't have that thick layer of decaying organic muck. Therefore, they hold oxygen much better. A hard bottom provides a clean environment. It's a place where fish can rest without getting into that dead, gassy water. When you use your fish finder, a hard bottom will typically return a much brighter, thicker line. A soft, mucky bottom gives a weaker, thinner, or sometimes even a double echo return. Learning to read this difference on your sonar is a critical skill. It's the first clue that tells you whether you should even bother drilling a hole or if you should just keep moving on to a better area. Imagine this exact scenario. You've been walking for 10 minutes across the ice, following your GPS to that promising deep spot. You finally get there. You fire up the auger, the engine roars, and the blades start to chew through the ice. It's a great feeling. Then it punches through. You pull the auger out of the hole, and you see it. The water that comes up is dark and murky. Maybe it even has a slight sulfur or rotten egg smell. When you drop your sonar transducer in, you see that the bottom is just a fuzzy, weak line. That's your sign. That is the moment of truth. You've likely found one of those dead holes. The smart angler recognizes this immediately, packs up, and moves. The hopeful angler sits there for an hour, wasting precious time on a spot that was never going to produce fish in the first place. Now let's talk about finding the good spots. The magic isn't in the hole itself, it's on the edges, it's in the secondary features. A simple bowl-shaped hole is not that attractive, but a hole that has a sharp drop-off, a submerged point, an underwater hump, or a rock pile nearby. Now you're talking. These are the places that concentrate fish. Bream won't just sit out in the open basin. They relate to structure. This structure provides them with a sense of security. It also creates breaks in any subtle underwater currents, giving them a place to rest without expending much energy. Your mapping software is your best friend here. Don't just look for the big blue spot. Look for the places where the contour lines are stacked tightly together, indicating a steep break. Think of these ledges and drop-offs as underwater highways. Fish use them to travel. They move up and down these structures as conditions change throughout the day or night. They might move up onto a slightly shallower part of the ledge to feed, then drop back down into the deeper water to rest. A fish sitting on a steep break has options. It can change its depth by 10 or 15 feet just by moving a few feet horizontally. This is incredibly energy efficient. By positioning yourself on one of these structural elements, you are putting your bait in a high-traffic zone. You are intercepting fish as they go about their daily routines. Fishing in the middle of a barren basin is like setting up a deer stand in the middle of an empty field. You need to be on the trail. Let's talk about your fish finder for a minute. Too many anglers use it as a simple fish or no fish machine. They drop the transducer in, and if they don't see a big bright arc, they leave. You need to look closer. Pay attention to the details. As we mentioned, look at the bottom return. Is it thick and bright or thin and fuzzy? Are you seeing any separation from the bottom? Sometimes fish will hold so tight to the bottom that they almost blend in. Look for a bottom line that seems thicker or fuzzier than the surrounding area. This can indicate a school of inactive fish hugging the bottom. Also, look for signs of life, even if it's not your target species. The presence of baitfish is a fantastic sign. If there's food in the area, the predators, including big bream, won't be far away. A common mistake on sonar is misinterpreting what you see. A giant, dense cloud of marks near the bottom isn't always a school of big bream. It can often be a massive school of tiny baitfish, like shiners or shad. One way to tell the difference is by the shape and the individual returns. A school of baitfish often looks like a chaotic, fuzzy ball. A school of bream, on the other hand, will often show more distinct individual marks within the school. They tend to be a bit more organized. You might also see them suspended in a shape that looks like a Christmas tree, wider at the bottom and tapering towards the top. Don't be afraid to drop a small jig down to test what you're seeing. If you start getting tiny little taps from minnows, you know it's bait. If you get a solid thump, you've likely found the right species. The classic image of a bream school on a flasher or sonar is that Christmas tree we just mentioned. This is a telltale sign that you are in the right place. This formation happens when a large school of fish stacks up vertically in the water column. The fish at the bottom are more spread out. and they get tighter together as you move up. Seeing this on your screen is the moment every ice angler dreams of. It means you've found a large, competitive school of fish. When they are in this formation, they are often active and willing to feed. Dropping a jig into the top of that tree and slowly working it down is one of the most effective techniques there is. If you see this on your screen, do not leave. You have found the spot. This is what a true wintering area looks like. Here is something most anglers completely ignore in lakes and reservoirs: current. They think current only exists in rivers. That's not true. Even in still water, there is always some form of water movement. Wind can create a surface current that in turn causes a subtle reverse current in the depths. In reservoirs, the pull from a dam can create a slow but steady flow. In natural lakes, springs, or small inlet creeks can create areas of movement. Even a temperature difference between two parts of the lake can cause water to circulate. This current, no matter how slow, is a major factor for fish. It carries oxygen and food. Fish will always try to position themselves to take advantage of it without wasting energy. Finding these subtle current areas is an advanced but deadly tactic. So how do bream use these subtle currents? They use them just like a trout in a river. They look for current breaks. A current break is anything that blocks or diverts the flow of water. This could be a large rock, a submerged tree, a sharp point, or a steep drop-off. The fish will tuck in on the downstream side of this object, in the slack water. Here, they are sheltered from the main flow, so they don't have to fight the current, but they are still close enough that they can easily dart out to grab any food that drifts by. When you're looking at your map, try to visualize how the water might flow across the structure. Where would the calmest spots be? Those are your high percentage targets. They are the resting and ambush points for winter bream. Finding these spots is like finding a secret honey hole. Another crucial concept is the neighborhood idea. A great wintering spot is rarely a single isolated hole in the middle of nowhere. It's usually part of a larger complex system. It's a neighborhood. For example, you might have a deep hole that acts as the main resting area. But connected to it, you'll find a long tapering point that the fish use as a feeding shelf. And nearby, there might be a saddle or a channel that they use as a travel corridor to another part of the lake. The best anglers don't just fish one spot. They identify the entire neighborhood. They drill holes on the point, in the channel, and in the deep hole. They figure out where the fish are at that specific time of day and under those specific conditions. They understand that the fish are using the whole area, not just one feature. Ultimately, it always comes back to one simple question: where is the food? Fish have two primary drivers in the winter: safety and food. A spot that offers both is a guaranteed winner, so when you're analyzing a potential area, think about the forage base. Where are the bloodworms, the freshwater shrimp, the small minnows? They often relate to the same things the bream do: hard bottoms, subtle current, and structure. If you can find a deep hole that also has a nearby shallow flat with some leftover weed growth, you might have found the perfect combination. The bream can rest in the deep water for security and then make short, efficient trips up to the flat to feed. Following the food chain is the oldest and most reliable trick in the fishing book, and it works just as well under the ice. I remember a conversation with an old fisherman on a frozen lake years ago. I was out in the middle of this huge basin, drilling hole after hole and catching nothing. He was sitting maybe 200 yards away, right on the edge of the main drop-off, and he was consistently pulling fish. I finally gave up and walked over to ask what his secret was. He just smiled and pointed down. He said, "Everyone fishes the bottom of the bowl, but nobody lives in the bottom of the bowl. They live on the rim, where they can see what's coming for dinner." He wasn't fishing in the 30-foot hole. He was fishing in 17 feet of water, right on the lip where it dropped from 16 to 25 feet. That single piece of advice completely changed my approach to winter fishing forever. He was fishing the neighborhood, not the basement. Let's also get rid of the myth of the lazy or lethargic winter fish. Yes, their metabolism slows down. They aren't as aggressive as they are in the spring, but they are not dormant. They don't just sit in one spot for 4 months. They still have to eat. They still move. Their movements are just more strategic and more energy efficient. They will make small, calculated moves throughout the day to find food or more comfortable water. They might move up 5 feet in the water column as the sun warms the water slightly. They might shift 20 yards to the side to get into a subtle current seam. Understanding this is key. You can't just drill one hole and wait all day. You have to be willing to move and search because the fish are doing the same thing, just on a smaller scale. So, how do you put this all into practice? When you get to a new potential zone, don't just drill one hole in the deepest spot. You need to map it out with your auger. Start by drilling a line of holes. Go from the shallow water across the drop-off and into the deep basin. This gives you a cross-section of the area. Drop your transducer in each hole for 30 seconds. Look at the depth, the bottom composition, and for any signs of fish or bait. This process might take an extra 20 minutes, but it's the most valuable 20 minutes of your day. It gives you a complete picture of the underwater landscape. You might find that all the fish are holding at a very specific depth, like 22 feet, right on the steepest part of the break. Without that series of holes, you would have never found them. I call this the test punch method. You're not trying to fish each hole. You're just gathering intelligence. Punch a hole, check it with the sonar, and move on. Punch another one 50 feet away. Keep doing this until you see something that looks promising. Maybe you see a cluster of bait fish, or maybe you see a few distinct marks that look like bream. Or maybe you just find a spot where the bottom composition changes from soft to hard. That's where you stop and investigate further. That's where you drill a few more holes in a tighter grid and actually start fishing. This is a systematic approach. It's so much more effective than just wandering around and drilling random holes based on a single dot on your GPS. You are actively hunting, not just waiting. So, to put it all together in one final thought, a true winter bream staging area is a combination of things. It's rarely just the deepest water. It's a spot that offers depth for security, yes, but it must also have a hard bottom to provide a clean, oxygenated environment. It must have some form of structure, like a ledge, a point, or a rock pile, to give the fish a reference point and a current break. And finally, it has to have a nearby source of food. When you find a place that checks all of these boxes, you haven't just found a random hole in the ice. You found a winter home. You found the spot where the fish want to be. And when you find that spot, the catching becomes the easy part. The hard work of the search is over. So let's pull all of this together. That deep spot on your map, it's just a starting point. It is not the final destination. For years, we've been trained to think that depth is the only thing that matters, but that's just not the truth. The real mind-blowing breakthrough happens when you stop asking, where is the deepest water? And you start asking, where is the best living space for a fish? Where is the oxygen? Where is the hard bottom? Where is the structure and the food? That is the question that will change your entire winter fishing game. The hole itself, the basin, might be a trap. A lifeless, oxygen-deprived dead zone. But that small, insignificant-looking ledge on the edge of that hole? That could be the gold mine you've been searching for all these years. This shift in thinking will save you countless hours of sitting on dead, unproductive water. It will make you a more efficient, a more thoughtful, and a much more successful angler. You'll stop guessing and start making decisions based on what the fish actually need. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this. If this just opened up your eyes a little, do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button. And please give this video a like. It truly helps the channel more than you know. Now, I have to hear from you. After all this, what is the one thing you're going to look for differently on your next trip out on the ice? Drop it in the comments below. I want to read every single one. Let's talk about it.